how we acquire different tools in order to get to that cognitive, most sophisticated tool that we have, which is our prefrontal cortex, right? So, as part of our wins, or how we would actually celebrate somebody filling in those gaps, right? We actually divide the brain growth stages into 5 stages. We say we have a seed stage, right, which is where you are as a baby. And then you have the sprout stage, where you start kind of having some gross motor movements, and balance coordination starts to happen, right? And then you have the growth stage, you have the blossom stage, and then you have the flower stage. Why is that important? Because when I talk to my parents, I talk to them about a brain actually developing and opening up like a flower, right? There are 4 primary hierarchies or trajectories of the way the brain develops. It goes from right to left, it goes from the bottom to top, from inside out, and uh, from the behind to the front, right? So the way that develops is again like a flower. And then we discuss slightly things that could have happened early in development that could potentially have had an impact the way the brain receives sensory information. And you mentioned major 5 that we're all familiar with, right? But what most of us forget about is that proprioception input, which is the spinal movement piece. And so if we have improper spinal alignments, that's where proprioception gets really messed up, and the brain then does not receive sensory input as well, and it causes some issues that are later on manifesting themselves as balance issue, or as having focus issue, or whatever it may be. But we have an interruption in the way the brain was receiving an information at a specific level of the development. So the brain just hosed through that, right? Passed through that, and it just started building on something new. But I'm sure you would agree, what we know is those early things that we have to develop are actually the triggers for developing more stuff, right? You can't really outgrow something like, oh, outgrow crawling. Yes, I developed, right? I appear to be very typical, but there are things we will lack. There will arise a vulnerability along your lifespan that will create challenges to stressors or to outcomes that we really want to achieve, right, later in life. So that's really where I kind of come in with talking to parents about why brain development is so important, and why spinal integrity is again the driver for that prefrontal cortex development. Do you want to add anything to that from your perspective?
No, I mean, I think I would just add, you were talking about how it can be, how easy it is, I think, to miss that your child is struggling developmentally, which is why I kind of was explaining that we do look at what they're doing, but we want to think about how they're doing it, because children are so resilient and resourceful. They are driven to develop. That is their entire job, is to grow and get bigger and learn how to do new things. And so whenever there's a deficit, a lot of times we don't see development freeze, but what we do see is that there's all these little new routes that they go around. They're like, oh, I'm roadblocked at this skill, so how am I going to still be able to crawl? Well, maybe I can scoot on my bottom. Well, maybe I can not use my legs and just pull myself forward with my arms. So children find ways to do what they want to do. But the thing is, we don't want kids to miss the growth that comes with doing things, with being able to just overcome that barrier. And I think that's what you're really speaking to, is like, yes, they're going to adapt, But is that really best? And can we instead help them through that barrier so that we prevent a lot of challenges later on? And I think you and I are just so on the same page about that.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. I love that. Let's see here. Where do you want to go next? What do you want to share? Do you have a specific story? Like literally one of the things that I stood in my mind is